Have you been wondering how these six know-it-alls got together? Well, back in 2020, after 6 months of COVID-19 pandemic isolation, Barbara Brackman decided she needed some company. She invited 5 quilty friends to join her for Zoom cocktail parties every other Monday evening in order to discuss the state of the country and maybe some quilts too. So convivial were the Zooms that they decided to gather virtually every week instead of every 2 weeks. Quilt soon became the main focus of these discussions, of course. Questions were raised, pondered, and discussed, debated, and occasionally settled about particular examples that were brought to the party. Julie Silber then declared that surely the public would be fascinated by their discussions. And so the six know-it-alls, a tongue firmly in cheek name, was born. It quickly became apparent that technical help was required, so Tara Miller of the Quilt District came on board. After 3 freebie sessions, the six know-it-alls, all professional quilt historians with a combined experience of a quarter of a millennium, began to charge for the programs. We're so happy you could join us.
Welcome to this episode 8 of the Six Know-It-Alls Talk Quilts. This month's program is titled Quilt Stories Beyond the Grave in honor of Halloween and as autumnal season. Our 4 presenters this time are Lynne Bassett of Palmer, Massachusetts, Barbara Brackman of Lawrence, Kansas, Debby Cooney of Baltimore, Maryland, and Alden O'Brien of Washington, D.C. Our timekeeper this month is Know-It-All Julie Silber of Berkeley, California. Our producer is Tara Miller of Atlanta, Georgia. And I am your host, Mary Kay Waldvogel of Knoxville, Tennessee. Let's begin with Lynne Bassett. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mary Kay. I will share my screen and we will get going. I came to this topic of spiritualism and this quilt through my interest in the Romantic era of the early 19th century. I did a major exhibition regarding costume of the early 19th century, and now my interest has turned to how Romanticism affected quilts. And we'll get right to it here. Attitudes towards death altered significantly during the Romantic era, including the vocabulary. So no longer were the dead put in coffins, they were put in caskets, which is the medieval term for a jewel box. And the plots where, the deceased were laid were no longer called burying grounds and just kind of abandoned until the next body needed to be interred. They became cemeteries, which is a medieval Latin term for a sleeping place. So there's a whole attitude change about death. Cemeteries were landscaped and decorated with architectural elements and sculpture and became places for picnics and bucolic strolls. Romantics in the early 19th century fed on melancholy. Pondering death at the grave of a loved one was considered to be elevating to one's character and was promoted in a belief that it elevated the culture of the entire nation. And we certainly see this also in friendship quilts of the period, which not infrequently include a block or some kind of commemoration for someone who is deceased. People in the Romantic era also loved to be scared. Highwaymen, gypsies, supernatural phenomenon, and threatening storms all fired the Romantic imagination. The period's fascination with death and the spine-tingling excitement of potential danger fed the taste for Gothic horror stories, including the classic Frankenstein, which was written by Mary Shelley and published in 1818. The first vampire stories also emerged at this time. Remarkable developments in technology, including railways and telegraphic communication, collapsed time and distance and was often felt by the Victorians to be uncanny. Romantic enthusiasm for the supernatural, mourning, piety, and emotion in general combined to create a religious movement called spiritualism. Spiritualism was a Christian religion that believed it was possible to communicate with the dead through a séance, which spiritualists called receiving messages, where everyone put their hands on a table in a dark room because, of course, spirits of the dead only reside in darkness and shadows. A medium would go into a trance, allowing the spirits to enter his or her body, and then the messages were conveyed variously by wrappings, by levitating the table, by moving the medium to write something out, or even by smell. The religion was spurred by the three Fox sisters from upstate New York, who capitalized on the idea that their house was haunted and claimed to talk to the dead by interpreting wrappings on the table for yes and no answers to questions, and they became a huge phenomenon. 40 years after they started this, the middle sister, Margareta, actually confessed that it was a ruse, that they made these wrapping sounds by cracking their toe joints. But it didn't matter. Spiritualism had caught on like wildfire. It was a significant religious movement, capturing the imagination of millions of Americans who firmly believed in it. Like every other New England church, the first Society of Spiritualists of Willimantic, Connecticut, had a Ladies' Aid Society. And this quilt was acquired by the Connecticut Historical Society not very long ago, maybe 10 years ago. And it was made by a group from this society. It's stamped on the back with the name made by the First Society of Spiritualists, Willimantic, Connecticut, November 1868. And forgive my photo, CHS hasn't had it professionally photographed yet. So these are just my shots from storage. The museum also has in its library the account books of this society from 1872 through 1935, along with a printed lecture presented before the society in 1886 that explains how spirituality is consistent with Christian teachings, plus the advice that messages from beyond the grave should be taken as they would from any friend, and that the true way to obtain guidance is still the old way. Go to God in prayer and trust, and he will in some way impress his will upon us, as the lecturer stated. I thought it was interesting to see, also to see in the account books that there was a charge for holding a seance, somewhere between $2 and $5. Not surprisingly, the tragic losses of the Civil War only furthered the need to believe that communication with the dead was possible and drew more adherents to the spiritualist movement. So this quilt was made as a fundraiser to assist veterans, this is the belief anyway, and their families soon after the war ended. There are a couple of other quilts very similar that the Connecticut Quilt Search Project identified, including this one that's in a private collection. But I put arrows on all the blocks that are exactly or very similar to the Spiritualist Society quilt that I'm talking about. So you can see how similar they are. They both have these union symbols. This one is unique to the Spiritualist Society. It's a bell and says, ring out the old, ring in the new, ring out the false, ring in the true. And this was another method of identifying when a spirit had entered the seance, entered the room, a bell would ring. So I think this is unique to the Spiritualist Society quilt. The pocket watch is a symbol of mortality and death. And this applique design includes a representation of hair jewelry. You can see this watch fob here and how it relates to a real hair piece here. And I'll bet this is also a hair piece brooch there as well. This same black cat appears on a number of quilts and must have been a pattern that was available or widely known somehow. Religious symbolism that appears on this quilt is common to a variety of Victorian decorative arts. Here we have the key for St. Peter, the anchor, which is for hope, and of course the cross. I suspect this house may represent Excelsior Hall, the meeting house of the Spiritualist Society in Willimantic. It was described in records as a substantial plain structure containing vestry and audience rooms, and is capable of seating 300 to 400 persons. And then there are these blocks with everyday implements, but I think that they represent the efforts at feeding, clothing, and keeping busy these veterans who were in need. The mortar and pestle represents doctors and pharmacy, of course. We have spectacles down here. In addition to being a pretty design, the strawberries may be a reminder of strawberry suppers, which were common Civil War era fundraisers. The account books of the Spiritualist Society shows them offering bean suppers, harvest suppers, Easter suppers, strawberry suppers, a daffodil supper, and dances. And I'll end with this question. I have no idea what this is. I have asked around, and I have not been able to come up with an answer yet. Nobody I've asked knows. So if anybody has an idea of what this item is.
Thank you, Lynn. And boy, I don't know. Does anybody else? Any of the other KIAs have an idea?
See at the top, there's a gray thing. What if you flip that over? I think it has to do with carpentry, maybe.
Carpentry.
No. Somehow this looks like a lever that you would
and there's the
pull and
the screw that holds it together. I think you could flip that, but I'm just thinking, you know, it's some kind of thing that is aligned, a tool.
It looks like something where you click it and it makes the clicks for all the phony messages.
Wait a minute.
Well, I did ask the curator of tools at Old Sturbridge Village, and he had no idea.
Huh.
He did not know what it was. So
I don't know either.
I think it's a tennis court that's been built on top of a red piano.
Okay.
Well, what about those black cats?
That explains it.
Yeah. What anybody else have ideas? That I know I've seen that black cat in other quilts, but I didn't think to save pictures.
Why don't you stop screen sharing, Lynn? And I will screen share.
Excuse me.
I will try. All right, screen share.
And while
All right, here we have the Willimantic quilt in the middle. I have seen many cats like this. Now, there's the way the cat is positioned there with those triangles or circles there and his tail curled. You see it over and over again. And especially in the 60s, and especially in the center of the universe, as my mother used to say, that sort of New York City up to Connecticut, down to New Jersey area. And over here we have something from Tarrytown, New York, a quilt probably made after the war that says victory over the cat. I think it had some kind of Civil War symbolism, but the Kilkenny cats killing each other, I don't know. One of the most important things, I think, is this.
Yeah, look at that.
Is this one from Lucinda Honstein's 1867 quilt, which is so involved in the Civil War with Jeff Davis and a freed slave. And she has two cats with that same, although she's, of course, better than anybody else and puts stripes on her cats. I don't know. I've looked and looked, but it's certainly indicative of that area and that time.
Not to mention the yarn whiskers.
And it's a pretty darn good cat.
Very clever.
Well, I knew I'd seen that cat, and I just wrote about that quilt, so like, duh.
Well, no, I mean, you have to kind of get obsessed with it.
And this book, Cats on Quilts by Sandy Fox, has lots of other images in here. Of course, she's mistaken about one of the things on here, but that's okay. Otherwise, the cats are correct. This is
That's a raccoon. That's a raccoon. That's not a cat. They try to pretend they're cats, but they're raccoons.
okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. That was great. And
Very interesting.
Barbara is next, and she's going to kind of change the feel. And we're going to get Barbara talks a lot about fabrics and how to date quilts, how to date fabrics, and she's actually, I think, going to talk about how fabrics bleed.
All right. Well, let me do my share here.
While she's doing that, remember Ruth Finley was a
Good point.
spiritualist too.
Oh.
Horrors. Oh my.
Well, I'm going to scare you here with some tales of bleeding reds. Bleeding Reds, a nightmare of horror. Years ago, I saw this quilt on eBay. It looked like a really cool quilt. It had this kind of primitive, as we used to call it, applique, nice direct colors. Some of them a little bit faded, but really a pretty good example of a Southern quilt from the 1880, 90, etc. period. I wondered if it was all cotton. That you can see in this detail that the red does have some kind of a glaze to it, but I think that it might be all cotton. So years went by, maybe one or two, and I saw a picture that somebody showed us on our, I think it was the Southern Quilts page. Horrors! What happened? The problem is, of course, that the red dye is unstable, and thinking that it might be wool might explain it, because when wool is dyed red, it is not meant to be washed, but it does look like cotton. Some of these reds look exactly like cotton. So I don't know. Not only am I horrified, I'm ignorant. So I thought that know-it-alls might have some answers. If you wanted red in cotton, there were many ways to get it that were not very stable. But the most stable and that would produce a true bright red that was really desirable was called turkey red, named for the area in the Levant where they invented these formulas, and everybody called it turkey at the time. It was not a dye as such. It's not something you could sell in a package. It's a process, and it's a very laborious process, and it's very hard on the fabric because there's so many steps involved that are rather abusive to it, and it does abrade. But when it's new, it looks great. It's just a bright cherry red, bluish red. It was more expensive than other fabrics, and you would sometimes pay quite a premium for it, but you could rely upon it. They could also print it, as you can see in the quilt block up there, or it could be solid. Either was quite desirable, and either was considered quite the thing for American quilts. Since it was expensive, the dyers were always thinking, how can we make it cheaper and better for us? More direct, rather than all these processes of boiling in oil boil calico. So about 1880, they came up with a synthetic dye that they called Congo red. Why Congo? Probably because of the Belgian Congo was quite in the news, and we would celebrate Empire at the time, which even though it was the British Empire, it was celebrated around the world. Congo red, as you can see from Alfred Allen's chemical analysis there, is a bright crimson red, the bluish red that we're looking for, but the color is far from permanent. So things might bleed, but things might fade. And this was very common after about 1880. He says exposure to both light and air for a short period would dull the color. You could restore it. I don't know what he's talking about there, but after longer exposure, which would be in the 130 or 40 years, You can't do anything with it. Now, if you were making clothing out of it, say aprons or clothes for little girls, which were quite popularly done in red, you could re-dye your clothes because it came in a package, Congo red, and it was advertised to re-dye faded clothing. Now, adult women you don't find surviving dresses from this period in red or even this color, the faded peachy tan for women. But for kids, it was quite a common thing. And I would imagine red shirts for little boys were also the thing. It says here that they used it with wool too, and that might be some of the problems with the bleeding reds and the fading reds that we see in wool quilts from the turn of the century. This is 1901. It's really a good clue to after 1880 when they started using it. So look for, quilts that have faded to that salmon red and think after 1880. The worst thing I think that could happen would be that it would fade completely away, in which you've done all this work, say on the quilt on the left, and you have very little to show for it. Really alarming. Let's hope she didn't survive to see what happened here. But it did fade fast. Now, as I say, they put it in packages. All those Putnam and Ritt dyes that advertised turkey red were false advertising. It's a direct dye in a package. You put it in water, it directly colors the fabric, and then it fades and bleeds. And that's, the scary part. Fading we can handle a lot better than we can take bleeding. Now, today we have color catchers, and they do work to some degree to ameliorate the problem. Fabric today, red fabric still bleeds. I'm very cautious in making a red and white quilt. And I know the fabric that I make, I would like to have a nice bluish red, just like the turkey reds of the past. But there's something about optics and chemistry, it just doesn't really work. If you get a bluish red, it has a tendency to bleed. So what you tend to get is something that goes towards orange, which is a very traditional color, or something that we use a lot in the reds that I do is kind of a tomato soupish, slightly orange, but it's fast, and that's important. When I was first started making quilts, I'd tell you that if your reds bled, you're supposed to test them. You're supposed to use salt and give it a salt bath, and that would cure your problem. Well, I'll tell you, if giving those beautiful blue reds a salt bath would cure the problem, they'd be doing it at the mill. So I'm not too optimistic about salt baths. There's not much you can do. It's in the chemistry. So here's some horrors. And the last, well, they also, I want to say here that they made prints in this Congo red too. They weren't very complex prints, but here we have more bleeding reds. And we have a quilt dated 1890, which is within that 1880s up to about 1940 date. I don't know what the dye is here. It's not Congo red because that's not what Congo red does. So if anybody has any ideas, please let me know. So that's the end of it. So what do you guys, do you ever see this in costumes?
Barbara?
I don't recall seeing anything that severe in costume. Do you, Alden?
No, I can't say that I have, and I don't know whether you can see me or not.
Yeah.
My appearing and disappearing on my screen, so sorry, but I am here. I can't remember anything nearly as bad as that, and you'd think you might see it in prints, of course, if it's a solid. But then again, well, if it's a calico dress, yeah, people are dunking it in the wash tub.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering
so,
if it's a homemade thing that people were.
But what would be a homemade dye that would produce that red? I wonder if it's a Ritt dye, not a package dye, say a diamond dye, which I had a picture up there. Well, these were sold under false pretenses, shall we say?
Yeah.
They were doing some home dyeing. I mean, I don't know about 1880 to 1920, but I imagine it was more commercially produced and perhaps more chemical based, but you get diary
Rather
records
than natural.
saying, I bought some red dye, or I colored cloth red today in diaries that I've seen. So it could have been done at home, although you'd think after 1880 it's so much easier and cheaper just to buy red fabric.
Oh, and they clearly had it down how to do a good, fast, at least relatively fast red in years
turkey red.
prior. I'm betting it's more like a lousy, like whatever they had in the period for a writ dye.
Yeah, Putnam and
A commercial dye.
and they were advertised as direct. Well, they didn't use that word, but easy to use. Turkey red is no way direct. It takes mordants, it takes all sorts of chemistry. But having a dye that you could just put in your wash tub and make it red must have been very appealing. Now, what did people use red for? Women didn't wear it for the most part. It was kind of.
Oh, I see red in dresses.
Bright red like that, huh? Well, children wore it a lot. It was a great thing to dress your little girls and your little boys in. And what I see in the Putnam dye and the diamond dye advertising is your red clothes, your children's red clothes have faded. Re-dye it with Putnam dye. So that works great in a dress that's all red. But it works, it doesn't work at all on a quilt that has white next to it. So even today, I mean, it's still a problem. What they're using today. I don't make red and white quilts anymore. I have been burned, and the reds do bleed.
Okay, Barbara?
I think it would be good it would be great if a conservation lab with really good technology, like one of those magnospectrograph or whatever.
Yes.
There may be a way to sort of test what are the chemicals. I don't know exactly what the process and what the capabilities are, but it's possible that some high tech, someone like the Smithsonian probably has the equipment.
Or Winterthur.
Yeah.
Winterthur, Colonial Williamsburg.
That would be
Julie, this is a fabulous
great
quilt.
dissertation topic or master's thesis topic.
Yeah, we'll get somebody. Where are all our graduate students? Well, this one is terrific because this is a perfect example of Congo red. And it really fades to a rather attractive color, which is close to what Lynne is wearing. It's a great color, but you don't want to mix and match because it really is. It's upsetting.
And that's important to say, that the reason that some of the reds are still there is they're a different dye that women mixed, because when they bought it, it looked the same color. But this is such a wonderful example, especially in this star here. You can see that it's not what she meant.
No, she didn't.
She originally had an all red and white quilt.
And we don't know what caused it to fade. It might have been just light and time in 6 weeks. I don't know. Let's hope she was long gone when that happened, because she put so much time into it. Now, one other thing I've had happen is I used to stack my quilts on the guest bed, and one day the roof leaked onto the stack, and the red wool leaked, bled down to the cotton quilts. It was just a disaster of like 10.
Oh no!
I have read actually in the Baltimore Appliqued Society newsletter of a way to use both Centropol and Retain to get the dye out of that. I've been trying to do it for 2 years, and I'm afraid of ruining what I got. But I am going to do it this fall. I will let you know.
You could ruin everything.
The woman who wrote it said that she had talked to the company, and they gave her exact instructions, and she followed them to the letter. And her whole, it was a quilt in her case, a whole quilt had run, and it came out fine. So I'm going to try it.
Try it, but try it on a new quilt maybe before your Baltimore.
I'm going to try it on a top.
All right. My friend Vicki Welch, pen pal, is a dyer, and she told I had a reds running in a quilt I made that just irritated me. And she said, buy a die catcher at the store, put 2 or 3 sheets in a big tub, and then put dishes on top of it. She said, the problem is people don't weight the stuff down, so pieces come up. So put dishes, which are impervious, and leave it for 2 or 3 days. And I tried that and it really worked. You know, those die catchers are for college kids who won't sort their laundry, and they seem to work.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for that. I think we probably need to maybe add a dye expert next time. It's interesting that this is a problem that's lasted 100 years, really, late 19th century, and it still is something that people are trying to deal with. Our next presentation is Debby, and you're on, Debby Cooney.
American fabric mementos of grief and loss are found on quilts and other forms of textile art from the mid-18th century to the present. Reminders of death and mourning were seen in clothing such as Victorian widow's weeds. Coffins were the vehicles of the last journey. Records exist of quilts' use as covers for coffins. This tambour embroidered linen panel was sold with no information. It is large enough at 68 by 100 to fit the purpose. But it may be simply a decorative piece, as an image of cemetery urns and trees were similar to those in these early 19th century embroidered mourning pictures. Reliably documented coffin covers are hard to find. The International Quilt Museum included this lavish embroidered silk and velvet crazy quilt in its exhibition Haunting of the Quilt House as a possible cover. It's 61 by 101, dates from 1880 to 1900, and probably was made in Florida. The Quilt Index lists one mourning quilt that might have been used as a coffin cover. It was created in memory of Coralie Walters, a 9-year-old girl who died in 1894. It consists of embroidered symbols of hearts and trees in the outer panels and details of Coralie's life in the center, which can be read from both ends. Willow trees have been associated with mourning since ancient times. These are found in classical Greek mythology as well as early New England gravestones. Bill Volkening's stuffed whitework willow tree medallion from the late 18th, early 19th century likely was made in Duxbury, Massachusetts, and it's a wonderful example of funerary art. The IQM's Weeping Willow quilt includes a raven and a tombstone beneath one of its 8 willows. Probably made in Berks County, Pennsylvania, it dates from 1860 to 1880. Polly Mello has gathered an impressive collection of mourning quilts. Her album Top from around 1850 to 1860 includes a willow bending over a gravestone. Her album quilt from around 1870 shows a woman placing flowers at 3 graves. An 1853 New Milford, Connecticut sampler album memorializes the lives of 41 members of the extended Ferris family. One block symbolizes aging family patriarch Zachariah Ferris with a withering tree, and another marks the death of a family member with the broken rose. Polly Mello's album with the broken rose here dates to 1880. The more elaborate grave monuments included urns and obelisks, and after the assassination of James A. Garfield, president in 1888, a structure copied as a commercial quilt block appeared. Polly Mello owns several, including one in somber dark blues and an embroidered black example. A coffin block pattern also was sold. The Quilt Index lists a few examples, most from the late 19th to early 20th centuries. An unusual family register quilt was made in 1848 by Eliza Sumner in Spencer, Massachusetts. She intended for the names of successive generations of Sumners to be added to the family record panel in the center. The celestial orbs of sun, moon, and stars are flanked by grids that may represent cemetery plots for the various decedents. This 1855 quilt of elm wreaths and trees, made by Cynthia Wells Standish of Wethersfield, Connecticut, replicates the arrangement of tombs in the family plot of Wethersfield's ancient burying grounds. Graveyards and burying grounds often look barren and severe, some with tombstones depicting death's heads, skeletons, avenging angels, and other reminders of the horrors of death. The best known funerary bed covers are those showing a graveyard and coffins made by Elizabeth Roseberry Mitchell and 2 of her daughters. They made the first to memorialize the deaths of two of their two sons who died a few years apart in 1836 and 1843, hence the two coffins. She used pieces of their clothing to construct the top, but never quilted it. The top has a grid pattern, dark colors, a jagged path, and willow tree, typical iconography of death and burial since colonial times. By 1840, the Mitchells had moved to Kentucky, where yet another son died in 1843. Elizabeth's second attempt resulted in a finished quilt with a similar configuration with some of the same fabrics. Coffins in the family plot are inscribed with the deceased name, and more sit on the edges, waiting to be moved into the center after the Grim Reaper's visit. Polly has recreated this Mitchell quilt. She moves caskets of her family and friends into the plots after their deaths. By 1830, cemeteries were moving away from church grounds and out of cities, being redesigned, as Lynn had talked about. These garden or rural cemeteries resembled parks with landscaping and plantings. The first to open in the US was Mount Auburn in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1831. The trend caught on quickly. Perceptions of death were changing in this era of the Second Great Awakening. The early emphasis on hellfire and damnation was giving way to hope for joy and salvation. The new style of cemetery can be seen in this wonderful 1846 quilt made by Mary Rooker Norris of Hagerstown, Maryland, at the DAR Museum. Norris inscribed a record of several generations of family births, marriages and deaths on a scroll, and 4 cartouches in the center. She used chintz applique to surround essentially a family burial plot with borders of flowers. She even replicates the 2 rows of cast iron fencing and cloth. These 2 quilts show the changes in attitudes toward death in the mid-19th century in the US quite graphically. So I have a question for Lynn. We've discussed, you have discussed with us that 1848 Eliza Sumner quilt, and I wonder if you think it's way off base of me to think that those were burial plots on that quilt.
Well, you blew by that so fast. I was like, wait, what's she talking about? So can you pull it up again?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, those triangles?
No,
Or the
grids,
diamond?
the gridded burial plots. I
Where?
wondered if these might be
Oh.
burial plots because you've got the sky and all these celestial symbols, and you've got the family record, but then you've got these grids. I'm thinking, well,
I don't think so. I think she was just a really good geometry student. Personally.
well, it just hit me, you know, when especially when you come to the next one where you've got these, you know, little squares here. You know.
But those are so square and
Yeah.
so gridded, you know, burial plots are rectangular.
Well, yeah, these are yeah, I guess so. Well,
Well,
It's a very,
just a thought.
very interesting comparison.
mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Well, I just think these 2 are just, you know, these 2 say it all about the changes that
Right.
occur. Yeah.
That's a fabulous comparison. I love it.
That
Well,
was,
And
Yeah.
tell us again, Debbie, the dates on each of these.
well, they're close. This one is the 1843, the graveyard quilt, and this Mary Rooker Norris is 1846. So I guess it was where your head was at.
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. Well, they're both very much in that romantic vein, that romantic zeitgeist and aesthetic. But they are just, it's like there's 2 different personalities. It's the same idea, but they're taking it in different directions.
Sides of the coin in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't forget the churches would have so much to do with this. So conservative churches maybe on the left, and more
Yeah.
liberal churches saying you can bury your loved ones
No,
outside a churchyard.
I happen to know that Mrs. Norris was Methodist because her her daughter she was living late in life with her daughter and son-in-law, and he was a Methodist minister, and they were moving around. And one of the churches that she spent a couple of years in is the Methodist church right here in my neighborhood in Capitol Hill, which is where we used to have my daughter's Brownie Girl Scout meetings. So I feel connected to Mary Rooker Norris in that way. So I don't know what the Methodists' attitudes are, etc. I think she's also got some romantic, nostalgic framed medallions are not the incoming style anymore. But I think when you pair it with the Kentucky coffin one, you really do get a different kind of feeling about death. Although I don't think her entire focus was death.
It seems like kind of an urban versus rural.
That's a good point too.
Perspective.
Could be, because Alden wasn't Mary Rooker Norris working with her sisters in a sewing business in Baltimore?
Yes. The family emigrated, including about 11 children, when she was young, and she and 2 or 3 sisters had a girls' school in Baltimore, at which they taught various forms of needlework. And we also have a very romantic looking silk needlework picture done by one of those sisters that was a co-teacher with her of a semi-ruined medieval church scene. So very, very romantic.
I wanted to say something about the power of the images. Both of them incredibly powerful. The one on the left is the Kentucky coffin quilt is very clearly what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, the minute you look at it, what it's about.
Yeah.
Where the garden cemetery quilt is, one could mistake it for just a very pretty central medallion quilt. And part of it, I just wanted to say, for me, that walkway in the Kentucky coffin quilt, the walkway into the plot, into the cemetery, is just, it just makes it even more powerful to me. That it's like there's a way in
And no way out.
I won't go all the way back to it, but the top, the walkway is jagged. It's not even a fence, it's just this jagged outline that goes into the center with the 2 boys' coffins made out of their clothing. Ooh.
Ugh, creepy.
Oh man.
The Norris one is also about the future generations, because she's making it for her granddaughter, who is her namesake. So it's looking back to the family, but it's also looking to the future. So I think that also lends a different, takes the aesthetic in a different direction.
Yes, for sure.
Debbie, you actually have time? You could go back. Really, that was there. You showed us some amazing images.
Let's look again.
Look.
See here, here's the jagged.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's sawtooth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is a very stark quilt. I mean, both of them are, and they're kind of primitive looking, but they're they're very effective.
The emotions just grab you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the one on it is a top. For a long time, people weren't aware of this quilt top being
right. But here's Polly's, and I just hope that there's not one of these coffins down here with my name on it.
I bet it is. That's what you get for having friends who are creepy.
Anybody else want to say anything about them? I think these are fabulous to bring all these, and then to have Alden here from the DAR who could talk specifically about it.
I got something to add.
Okay.
Debbie, if you can stop sharing your screen, I've got just a quick little something. It's up, isn't it? The pillow?
Yes.
Garfield.
Yeah. So you can see it's sort of a crazy quilt pillow with those silk screened ribbons. Up here we've got something about an annual gathering of elephants, and then this obvious black in memoriam to Garfield. It was My sense is that it was a more traumatic event than we tend to think it was. It's what was it, 13 or 16 years? I guess 16 years after the assassination of Lincoln, and the country was hit again with an assassination of a president. And we do see it in needlework.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, you guys remember the assassination of Kennedy. It was life-changing. It was culture-changing. And that Garfield, I mean, if we had time, I would show, well, we're going to be able to do that on our new Facebook page, but I'll show you a lot of Garfield mourning. It was.
How about for McKinley?
No.
McKinley
there
came
some
along
for
not too long
McKinley, too?
after that too.
Yeah, McKinley. Yeah.
My
Oh,
father-in-law was born in 1897, and he said he could remember the day McKinley was shot because all the grown-ups were just freaking out and so sad. It really made an impression on him. Just as, you know, all of these big things like when Kennedy was shot, or when you heard that Martin Luther King was shot, or for the younger generation, where were you when you heard the Challenger exploded? And we have these moments of hearing about a tragedy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
And
really
this is a great lead-in to Alden's paper, right? I mean,
Tragedy.
here we
Right.
go. A national tragedy. Well, we'll let her tell the story. Go ahead.
right. Well, I am going back to another quilt of Polly Mellows. All right, I'm going back to a quilt in Polly Mellows' collection. Polly is the seventh know-it-all, or today unofficially, because so many of her quilts are coming up. She kindly lent this to the DAR for my last exhibit, which you can still see online. And it's redwork embroidery, as you see, and it's really a bedspread, not a quilt. It has no filling, and I forget whether it's 1 or 2 layers. The blocks are all copies of newspaper photographs, and they're in response to the tragic story of the kidnapping of Anne and Charles and Anne Morrow Lindbergh's baby Charles Jr. in 1932. Which was dubbed the crime of the century and gripped the national press. And tragically, the boy's body was eventually found a couple of months later, and a suspect was later tried and convicted and executed, although there remain some doubts about his guilt. And of course, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories because people are stupid. But anyway, I'm not going to get into the details of the investigation and the trial. You can look it up, and I'm just focusing on the quilts. Most of the blocks I've been able to trace are from specific photos that appeared in the press after the kidnapping. Some were archived photos that had already appeared because, of course, after Lindbergh was the first to make a solo trip across the Atlantic in the Spirit of St. Louis airplane, he was an international figure and a national hero and so on. And he married the poet Anne Morrow, and they were very much a celebrity couple. And so let's start with the top 2 rows, which are here. At upper left, we have Charles with his pilot's helmet, hat, whatever on, and a studio picture of Anne. And we see him in another photo down near the bottom. I've put in the upper left, you can see which blocks I'm talking about. Notice the untidy hair, which doesn't appear in other photographs of him when he's properly dressed. So I believe that this is him in one of these pictures where you see his hair flopping down. And that's right next to a picture of his famous airplane. And then the main focus is on the baby. All of these blocks turn out to be the baby. At first, I thought some of these might have been adults with short bobbed hair, but the more I look at it and the more I find pictures, they seem to be the baby. So after the kidnapping, pictures which had previously appeared in the newspapers were reprinted. The pictures of him at the table were from a photo op on his first birthday. And I think it's interesting that the maker had such different scales for these two. One is much smaller than the other. And on the left, she left out the ball that he's kind of kicking. And so it's also reversed. And there's just one I haven't been able to identify, but it's so much like the others that I'm pretty sure it's the baby. And outside of these, we have the family portrait of Anne with 3 or 4 generations, her with the baby and her mother and her grandmother. And these were also reprinted in the papers, as you can see. And here are just a couple of examples where they are printing old and new pictures of the Lindberghs to talk about the family. And see the circled one, we're about to see that in a moment. The only one of the only obvious allusions to the actual kidnapping, oh, sorry, I don't know why those two ended up sideways. I'm so sorry. We have the nanny, Betty Gow, who was seen here in a photograph snapped from a distance by a paparazzi who knew they had paparazzi in the 1930s, and a picture of her that appeared in the newspapers during the investigation. And almost the only obvious allusion to the actual kidnapping is this block, which reproduces this news photograph, which is a little bit blurry, but it shows the police trying to recreate how the crime happened. That they found a ladder nearby, and they found imprints of where the ladder had been put. And they think that somebody removed the boy from the house via a ladder. And just today, I finally figured out who this character is on the bottom row. These last 3 on the bottom row are the only ones I hadn't been able to identify. And I finally found this picture of Dr. Condon, who, it's a long story, but he volunteered to help negotiate with ransom notes and money and so on. And so this seems to be taken from this photograph, which I just found earlier today. But who don't we see? It's interesting who doesn't appear here. These 3 blocks, now we've identified the middle, but the 2 on either side, I still don't know who that is. Their hair doesn't seem to match either Lindbergh or these other men in the investigation. The maid, Violet Sharp, here was interviewed along with her date that night. She went out with one guy, she said, and they interviewed him, and then it turned out, no, I actually went out with this other guy. I can't find pictures of them in the newspaper at all. So I don't think that's who that is, and they're pretty tangential. You would think she might appear because she was in the news a lot prior to and after sadly committing suicide as a result of all the stress and focus on her. And then we have Herman Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., superintendent of the New Jersey State Police, here in the bow tie. Doesn't look like him. Governor Harry Moore, doesn't look like him. Nor does it look like the later characters. Down at the bottom, you see the mugshot of Bernard Hauptmann, who was eventually convicted and executed, and the Attorney General, who would have been in the news a lot because he was prosecuting the case. So we don't see these people who are sort of the public figures as much as we see the family and the nanny who was in the family. So I think it's just kind of interesting to see that someone would make this and go back and do so many pictures of the baby and of the family. And I'm just going to leave it there for discussion. And I'll stop.
Wonderful.
Oh, I keep
you got
hearing.
Thank you, Alden. That was a really eerie quilt. Let me ask you, so do you know, or who made this, or does Polly know? And if so, why? What was the motivation? Were they related to the Lindberghs?
Well, Polly does not have provenance on this. As I recall, she said she did get it in or near New Jersey, so it may have been a very local story to the maker, but there's no specific provenance. I personally don't think the person had a personal relationship, because all of these pictures are things that were in the news. And I think that if you had a personal connection to this. This is not how you would memorialize this story. I don't think you'd put a picture of the nanny there. I don't think you'd put the paparazzi picture of the nanny with the pram and the Westie dog, as cute as he is. I don't think you'd put the picture of the ladder. It's just a little, I mean, it's not as sort of prurient and ghoulish and, ooh, let's get into this, you know, sad, creepy story as it could be. It actually shows a lot of restraint, but I think if you had a personal connection, this is not the quilt you would be making. So that's just my feeling, and I don't know whether you guys agree with me on that.
It seems like it could be the work of someone really, really obsessed with the crime, and there were many.
Yeah.
And that a way of, you know, connecting herself to it.
You know, the
Think
crime
about-
of the century. It might have been the crime of the century. When I was a child, it was brought up to me to be careful.
Yeah.
You know, people would kidnap you. No one really ever tried, but that was what my parents told me.
How were Germans seen in the country at that time? And Alden, you said something about there's some question about his innocence. Hauptmann?
Yeah, I didn't get deeply into it, into the story and all of that, but there may have been some anti-German sentiment. On the other hand, 1932 is, well, he wasn't caught until 1934. So that is after Hitler had been elected, but he was not as much in the news. And I don't think Americans were nearly as aware as they needed to be of what was going on in Germany. So I think we're far enough past when Germany was our enemy in World War I. And there's an awful lot of German Americans who had been here since the 1850s, 1870s, 1880s, 1910s. So I could be wrong, but I'm not sure that there was all that much anti-German sentiment. In any case, I also suspect this was made not too long after the kidnapping, before the trial, because there's nothing about the trial or the outcome of it on the quilt. I could be wrong. It could just be her personal focus, but it seems to me it's the kind of thing that's being done because she's upset about this story, and who wouldn't be upset at the thought of this 18-month-old baby taken from his parents' home, eventually found essentially in a ditch with his head bashed in. I mean, it was horrific, and anyone with a shred of human compassion would have been upset by this, and anyone who is a mother even more so. It's just, you know, the worst nightmare you could possibly have as a parent.
And she was
Well,
obvious.
we know that lots and lots of things are worked out by women with their sewing and quilt.
That's
We've
right.
seen that. We've seen that today and many other times.
And I wanted to save my last screen to talk about exactly that. This is my last screen to show you, which is, you know, a couple of 9/11 quilts. We know that many, many, many people worked out their grief and shock and horror over 9/11 through making quilts. I found a Princess Diana quilt online. I found a Challenger space shuttle quilt down there at the bottom with the stars, which I think is particularly evocative because it suggests the sky and it suggests sort of the explosion right there. And of course the AIDS quilt, which you know, is sort of maybe arguably the first modern example of this nation working out a tragedy through cloth and on this massive, massive scale. So I think that this is what she's doing. I think she's just working out her trauma, essentially. And now I have to figure out how to get out of here. There we go. Stop share.
Oh, and we don't know.
She was obviously in fact, I just looking over the newspapers and clipping out the stories and stockpiling them and you know, delving into it completely, especially since you have 3 pictures, you don't know who they are. It was probably something very tangential to the story, but she still saved them.
Or pictures that in my scrolling through, you know, Library of Congress's Chronicling America newspaper database, when I put in the names of the various people involved, none of these things came up. if you put in just Lindbergh kidnapping, forget it, you'll never get through it. So
Yeah.
there could have been some more obscure picture of one of the main characters that looked like, and I just don't recognize it. But
You know, the other
yeah.
point is here that she was doing it in red work. That went out of style before 1910. And I mean, it may have continued on in a different color thread or multicolored, but this
Does that
might
say
have been
something ab-
somebody older who was
Maybe she was an
particularly
older
taken with it. It's
well,
very,
it's good if you want to do a drawing, you know,
Yeah.
because I don't think this, if you're doing want to do a recognizable portrait or picture, applique is not really going to get you there. But you're right about red work, although I'm also thinking of Ruth Finley had a couple of red work patterns that I've seen done in both blue and red thread. So I guess
was,
it's hung
yeah.
around a little longer, but you're right, it's not a popular thing in 1932.
No, it was the multicolor. And
Tangent-
she could have done it as outline, but it would have been more like doing the hair in yellow and doing the face in pink.
Very curious.
Tangentially, what it tells us is that red work is mostly commercial patterns that people bought, but they did trace, and they traced out of coloring books and illustrated books and apparently newspapers as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's why one of them is backwards, because you would hold it up to the window and
Oh, there
flip
you
over
go.
your, flip it over.
Or
Yeah.
the photo was
Well,
reversed.
the photo could be
The
backwards.
photo might have been reversed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the scariest, since it's Halloween, scariest quilts I've ever seen. I saw it at your show and it just rang a bell to me. The horror of losing that baby.
I know, but you know, I don't know about you, but if I felt that I needed to sort of process that, I think it's very much about the process rather than the product. Once I finished it and had that product, I'm
Hold
not
it
putting
up.
it on a bed. I'm not putting that on a bed. You know, bad karma.
Yeah.
Goodies.
Well, I think in the end, what we have is several presentations that touch on how quilt makers, you know, depict grief, memory, and nostalgia in their quilts. And it's interesting to compare that Kentucky graveyard quilt, the one from the DAR, the two that we looked at there, and then this one, and the one that Lynne did too. That's and
They're
then
all commemorating the dead.
whether they're realistic or abstract, and how are people depicting the many tragedies that we're experiencing nowadays. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Or
It's interesting that we have various impulses to respond to these emotions. And, you know, a tragedy happens and people show up near the site with candles the next night. That's one sort of form of a ritual and community-based thing. But then there's the very private and personal and ongoing thing that a needlework product represents. And I just think it's something very tied into our human impulses to make this connection and to process our emotions. Maybe it's you know, it's therapeutic.
Definitely.
Good way to sum it all up.
Yeah,
Great
good way to sum it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we've come to the end of episode 8. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you'll tell your friends. They too could still buy this presentation at Vimeo, and we've got a surprise for you. We'll have lots of surprises as the sessions go on. We hope you've enjoyed it, and let us know what you think about it. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Wasn't that a great episode from the Six Know-It-Alls? I have enjoyed every single episode that they have put out. My name is Alex Anderson. Well, guess what? They've invited me to be a know-it-all for episode 9, which is going to air November 10th. I couldn't believe it when they asked me because I don't consider myself a know-it-all, but Barbara Brackman said, if you call yourself a know-it-all, you know it all. So at least for 10 minutes, I'll be a know-it-all, and I'll be with great, great women of the industry who really understand the history, with Barbara Brackman, Mary Kay Waldvogel, Julie Silber, Lynne Bassett, Alden O'Brien, and Debby Cooney. These women really have it going on when it comes to history and quilting. And we're not talking that kind of history. We're talking history that comes alive and influences people even now with what they're doing, especially myself. So I'm going to be starting with a 19th century star quilt that I have coveted forever of Julie's and take it a little bit farther. So stay tuned. They're going to show you how to sign up, how to get your tickets, and I am so proud to be a know-it-all with the greats.
Did you know you can watch our previous episodes on Vimeo? Vimeo.com/quiltdistrict/VOD_pages. Or you can search for the Six Know-It-Alls when you go to the main page of Vimeo.com. You can also catch our first 3 episodes, which are free, on our YouTube channel. You can go directly to our YouTube channel, or you can go to youtube.com and search for the Six Know-It-Alls. You can also find all the updates and links to previous episodes on quiltdistrict.com. Go to quiltdistrict.com and then the Six Know-It-Alls tab, and there you'll find all the upcoming episode information, as well as the background on how the Six Know-It-Alls got started and some biography information on all of the know-it-alls. You'll also want to be sure you put your email address in here so that you can get notified of upcoming events straight to your email inbox.
I'm harping on this because lighting is so important to understanding the seasonal rhythms of quilting in this early period and why it began to change in the 19th century.
But that's not the way we use it, just to stick it in there. And so often you will find some turkey red pieces just put in there for a little flair. Even this one has a little bit of red down there, although that's a wool.
This is one quilt that I wanted to talk about today because we just were able to add it to the collection last year. Yeah, it was on loan for many years from the family. And some of you know the quilt maker Anna Catherine, known as Catherine Hummel Markey Garnhart of Frederick, Maryland. And thanks to my predecessor, Nancy Gibson, we now know of 10 quilts made by Markey Garnhart. And we now own 3.
Yeah. Yes. And that is very interesting that it's made for the wife of a minister. And I have never heard of the lady sewing group being called a circle of industry. So that's quite interesting. I wonder if it belongs to that denomination, if there are others that call themselves something similar.
So I just wanted to show how the designs of these bed rugs relate to whole cloth quilt and other types of quilts. So here we have one of the foot bed rugs, and here we have a whole cloth quilt that was made by Olive Curtis Baker in Connecticut. And the stitching of this whole cloth quilt is basically pretty much the same idea as you see in the bed rug.
The thing is, and this goes back to Lynn too with the bed rugs. If we were looking at men's work, if we were looking at ceramics like graffiti plates or painted chests, we wouldn't be thinking of it as a hobby.